In this week's learning, I learned about the complexities of learning a second language, specifically in the PDF that spoke about first and second language acquisition information, or that gave that information. I learned about the different theories of language development, which include nativist linguist theory, behavior learning theory, social interaction theory, connectionism theory, and the cognitive theory. Then it also spoke about the different theories that explain second language learning, and it also included the native linguist theory. And they made a mention specifically about how second language learners may need explicit instruction on what is not grammatical in the second language. And I understand that personally because when you have a language already that you fully understand and know how to conjugate the different words, you tend to try to take that same approach to the second language that you're learning. And so that's when those grammatical errors may occur. And I understand that without instruction or without, someone being able to correct you, you won't have the opportunity to know unless you're studying. Like growing up, my mom wouldn't correct us if our Spanish was poor. Specifically, like my youngest sister had to speak the least amount of Spanish, so her Spanish is not as strong as my older sister's. But I would ask my mom specifically to correct me because I wanted to speak it correctly. Um, one of the other theories that they mention is the Krashen's monitor model, and then it also talks about how the learned system acts as an editor or a monitor. So this key part about this theory is that monitoring only takes place when the speaker, number one, has plenty of time to be able to learn the language. Number two, is concerned about producing correct language, like I was mentioning, me demanding my mother to correct me. And then three, has learned the relevant rules, example, conjugations, and things of that nature. Um, Also, like I mentioned at the beginning, there are so much complexities to language in general, especially the English language. I learned about negation, I learned about inversions, I learned about, like I mentioned earlier, morphemes, and how there's so many things that could become difficult. There's a lot of things in our language, like the phonemes as well. I had never honestly heard about that. And so when I Google searched them, I found an example, which is phoneme number 7, and includes graphemes such as the letter C, K, CH, CC. So this example says Kit, cat, Chris, accent, folk, bouquet, queen, rack, box. I understand how they're almost sort of like tongue twisters. Then while reading through the PDFs regarding context for language learning, I learned about how there are different types of learners. It's not everyone has the same opportunities, approaches, or chances when it comes to learning. And they listed the 4 different types of scenarios that they wanted us to filter questions through. And so even just paying attention to the different types of learners made me realize, how different learning a second language can be for different types of people. So the first type of person is a young child that is learning a first language. I could be wrong, but I almost envision this as the easiest way to learn a language. The second one is a child that is learning a second language and is picking things up in the daycare or on a playground. And because I know that children are like sponges, I almost want to say that it's easier for children. Third is adolescents taking a foreign language class in their own country. I think it depends on the type and the level of education, but personally, I've seen, at least in the schools that I grew up in, a lot of kids not learning anything at all. It was only when I was in a magnet school that was specifically dedicated towards children learning modern languages that I actually witnessed others being proficient in other languages that weren't practiced at home, like French specifically. And then, and that's when I was in elementary school. That was not middle school or high school. And then the fourth type of individual was an adult immigrant, who had limited and disrupted education, who works in a second language environment. I think being a part of the environment is always very helpful. And then who was having no opportunity to go to language classes. So to me, that almost sounds like the most difficult. Now, while reading Taboy's text, I resonated with the developmental sequence of continuing to use their home language in the second language situation, which is what happened with me. I think my home situation is a little different because my dad did speak English and he would speak English to us. And so I think that's why some of us got away with not knowing enough Spanish. But I do consider, even though I was taught Spanish first, I do consider it to be a second language for me because I am not equally as fluent. And when I read about children learning a second language, everything that I understand and everything that I relate to is through Spanish as a second language. I also realize how difficult it is for children, and realizing that they do go through this non-verbal communication phase and periods where they don't talk, because they realize that they can't use their home language at school, and they realize that their peers aren't responding to them, and so they probably go into not probably they go into a phase of being quiet. And so I wonder how that affects them. I wonder if maybe if they're shy, or if they weren't shy, then they start becoming shy. I wonder how that affects kind of like their personality traits. And that is my summary for the week. Thank you.